I am grateful to be reading with you all and celebrating the launch of Diaries of a Terrorist. It's a book about abolishing the cops, etc. I just want to get into the shit and like hear all of the homies, so I'm gonna read the bios. All right. The first person that we have coming up is Gossett, who is a Black non-binary femme writer. They're currently a postdoc at the Center for Contemporary Critical Thought at Columbia University and will be spending time as a visiting scholar at the Center for Life Writing at Wolfson College, Oxford University in 2022, 2023. Their work has been published in anthologies, including Trapdoor, Transcultural Production and the Politics of Visibility, Death and Other Penalties, Continental Philosophers on Prisons and Capital Punishment, Transgender Studies Reader. They are co-editing a special issue of Transgender Studies Quarterly with Professor Eva Hayward on trans life in a time of HIV/AIDS. They are also co-edited with Professor Getzi, syllabus on trans and non-binary methods for Art Journal, which just recently received the 2022 CAA Art Journal Award. And Che has just informally been so vital to thinking and moving and breathing in abolitionist spaces, and is one of those folks that I'm just like, anytime I'm around you and Adam too, and we're walking down the city back in when I lived over here in New York, you're one of the folks where I'm like, I just want to shut up and listen. So that's the feeling I have in my heart right now too. So thanks so much for your thought leadership and your leadership on the streets, and such an honor to share this moment with you. I appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Chris, for that generous and amazing introduction. And I'm so honored to be here to celebrate your work and to talk with you all. So I thought I would read two things. Hopefully they relate. So I'll just start. Maybe, no, it's okay. Okay, so, oh, great. Okay, great, thanks. Can everybody hear me, first of all? Okay, great. So the first is about abolition and art and AIDS. And the second piece is about, it's kind of hard to tell who to look at, a biography that I'm working on and finishing about an AIDS activist named Kyoshi Kuramiya. So I'll just begin. So, my AIDS won't fit into your museum. Shan Kelly, with curators like these, who needs a cure? AIDS art and artists are extimate to the space of the museum, to use Lacan's terminology, for constitutive exclusion. The intimacy that is also foreign, given how a generation of art on and by those living with HIV/AIDS has shaped the New York City art scene and therefore the larger cultural world. I'm interested in this type of intervention, like the one behind me that was at the Guggenheim, for the ways that it refuses incorporation as an objective. In early December of 2015, the same week as World AIDS Day, the artist Kay Rosen collaborated with Visual AIDS and the Illuminator on an AIDS arts intervention called Radiant Presence. Projecting images that read, AIDS ongoing, going on, onto the facades of the Guggenheim and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, as well as the former site of St. Vincent's Hospital. The work of Rosen and Visual AIDS alerts audiences to the fact that St. Vincent's Hospital, once the largest AIDS ward on the East Coast, has been transformed into luxury condominiums. AIDS haunts gentrified space. The museumological intervention came not only from the curators within the museums, but from the outside, the unofficial curation imposed on the facade of the museum. The act was performative and fleeting. an institutional critique that decided to just side-eye incorporation and instead use the building as a signpost and then leave. Yet if aids in the museum are incommensurable and incorporation is impossible, where then do we turn? Where but inside the immanence of what Laura Harris terms aesthetic sociality that already exists and is the condition of possibility for that refusal itself. Rather than a melancholic liberalism, an unhappy inclusion, a somber realism where aids in queer revelry and transgression would be absorbed into the museum, the party is happening outside. It was the party that put together the protest and that continues after the virtual banner comes down. The claim that AIDS won't fit into the museum might also be read on liberal terms as a plaintive cry for inclusion, dispossession's lament. Dispossession implies a lost object, freedom. Yet freedom is never possessed, only shared. Freedom is a doing, not a having. Throughout this work, however, the ghost of another concept has haunted my analysis. That is the problem of freedom, Orlando Patterson. Saidiya Hartman begins where Orlando Patterson ends, with the specter of freedom. Yet rather than positing freedom as sundered from slavery, she shows how emancipation sutures the two. Abolition then discloses how so-called liberty is in fact a permutation of slavery. This would require us to end liberty as property and property as liberty. Abolition throws the coordinates of the political into crisis. Hartman's work discloses how the political ontology of freedom is slavery. She critiques racial liberalism, tracing its emergence not with the contemporary multicultural discourse of inclusion, but rather to a project of slavery's extension. She asks, how did emancipatory figurations of rights-bearing individuals aimed at abolishing the badges of slavery result in burdened individuality? Abolition, then, requires the undoing of the fated entanglement of the subject of freedom as well as slavery. Abolition isn't a closed formula, as in the fictive finality of the event, so-called emancipation, but rather an ensemble of perennial questions. Okay, so the next bit that I'll read is kind of a snapshot about this biography of an AIDS activist that I've been working on for like the past 10 years. And this is a clip from his FBI file that I ordered. Maybe I'll just talk, but his name is Kyoshi Kuramiya. He passed away in 2003 in Philadelphia. He was born at Heart Mountain internment camp during World War II, moved to Monrovia, California, and grew up there, was criminalized and arrested as a kid for like queer cruising in a park, institutionalized, kind of fled the conservative city of Monrovia and ended up in Philly and went to Penn for college and studied architecture. After college, he got involved in like CORE and SNCC and ended up as a kind of participant in the MLK March from Selma to Montgomery, was beaten and hospitalized while leading a group of like high school students with King and Reverend Shuttlesworth and others, and then returned to Philly and was involved in like homophile movement in '65, and then gay liberation movement, Black Power, also like at the People's Revolutionary Convention, the Panthers put together this really vibrant conference, which was like Afeni Shakur was there, Huey Newton met Sylvia Rivera there. It was pretty amazing, and they drafted like a kind of statement that included actually like the right to sex change. So like way before the era of so-called transvisibility, this was like part of our movements. Even when we as queer and trans people have been exiled from the left, we're still always already there. And He helped start ACT UP Philadelphia, and did a lot of really interesting radical work around early internet use as a means to distribute information about HIV/AIDS. And then for a hot moment, like 10 years, he weirdly collaborated with Buckminster Fuller. So that's like strange, but also not that strange, because so too did June Jordan. So I'm like interested in how not only like Fuller left his imprint on him, but also how he shaped the contours of Fuller's thought. So a lot of it has been archival research, but I just think this is hilarious because it's like there were all these informants who like followed him around, like in the Philly police, in the federal police, because he was put on the what was called like the index, which was tracking anarchists. His FBI file was like 150 pages, and it was part of COINTELPRO because like the field office that was raided was in Media, Pennsylvania, and a bunch of like righteous objectors, Quakers actually, raided the office, I think in the late 60s, and then mailed all the materials out to the newspapers. And so because it was Media, PA, they were surveilling people in Philly. And so, yeah, he was just being followed all the time. But this is just a funny clip where basically the informant is like, he's retired from activism. He's just living this kind of well, not reserve, but like gay liberationist stuff. And I just always thought it was like a kind of refusal of normative leftist politics and doing something else that could hold more of him. So yeah, so thank you so much. I hope any of this ties into what you're going to talk about, and happy to be here and celebrate with you.
Next up, Andrea Kareem is a trans Arab American punk poet, performer, cyborg. They're the author of Extra Transmissions. And with Kay Gabriel, they co-edited We Want It All, an anthology of radical trans poetics. Their second book, Villainy, reimagines militant collectivity in the wake of Gossett fire and the Muslim ban. They're Leo, my favorite, obsessed. Ooh, okay, I just found out my new friends. With queer terror and convertibles. Andrea, thanks so much for being here.
Hey everyone. Big congrats to Loma tonight on your debut. Super excited about it. It's been a long time coming, and I'm excited to be here to celebrate you tonight. I'm Andrea. I'm going to read from Villainy, which is my new book from Nightboat Books, and I think it's going to tie into a lot of what Loma's going to read to us later. The end of fascism looks like centuries of queers dancing on the grave of capitalism, the state, colonialism, Nazis, racism, oppression. It will be a grand party, even grander than Mardi Gras, and there will be no reason to sleep because there will be no need to work, and there will be such a revelatory pallor to the whole thing. The photos will be exquisite, and the libations and snacks fucking delicious. There will be a giant dance party, and Club Chai will DJ, and it will be at the Stud, and we'll all fucking dance until we sweat hard and makeup runs between faces. A transference, a transfusion of glam, a fusion of sweating bodies into a whatever singularity, a transfusion out of a fucking oppressed existence into a revelry, a full-blown revelry of queerness and desire that we have only now just barely begun to imagine, just barely begun to imagine, just barely begun to imagine. A slow song comes on. It's called the Leaving Song. The crowd pushes forward, but there is no longer a forward to break into. The crowd tries anyway until my feet are no longer on the floor and your feet are no longer on the floor. And I press my hand against your cock while I'm pressed against so many other people, and so many other people are pressed against you. Some of them are the same and some of them are just more, and our feet are off the ground. You are moaning. Some of the mass is concerned that you're going to pass out, that the possibility of a singularity unbecoming a singularity is beyond the present, is too soon. Our feet are off the ground. The crowd pushes forward, your cum covers my hand, the others pressed against me cover the back of my neck in sweat. You begin to fall, and I pull you up so you don't fall beneath the feet of the expanded self. I want a better apocalypse. This one sucks. So why don't you just fuck me out of reality? Imagine the possibility of singularity unbecoming. Imagine the possibility of unbecoming. It is imagined because a Nazi who shot a protester in Seattle is let out of jail within a couple of days. It is imagined because a bounty is placed on the head of the person who punched Richard Spencer on J20. It is imagined because the gay face of the alt-right is coming to Berkeley next week. It is imagined because civil disobedience just got banned in 5 states. It is imagined because a mosque got torched in Seattle on MLK Day. It is imagined because they have the money to take us all down. It is imagined because a bulletproof vest costs $400 to $700. It is imagined because I try to read theory, but I just think of you fucking me with your entire hand. It is imagined because we have yet to imagine the possibility of singularity, unbecoming, imagine the possibility of unbecoming. It is imagined because we have yet to articulate a collective desire. I think about the limits of what I will and will not do in order to stop this. I think about the limits of what I will and will not do in order to stop this. I have the limits of what my body is capable of, what my body can withstand, how much trauma I can absorb. I think about the limits of what I will and will not do in order to stop this. I have the limits of my resources, my networks, my friends. I think about the limits of what I will and will not do in order to stop this, but I don't want to think about the limits anymore because all of us together are expansive. I think about the limits of what I will and will not do in order to stop this while a friend texts me and says she saw my mugshot from 2012 while reading about the J20 DC protests. I put a rush on my FBI file. Just a whatever, singularity, collective spectator violence, anti-narrative, a closed world, a social space, language is a community made out of signs, a pure world of signs, the storage of torture, dissemination as colonization of the mind, when the ritual went overboard, because the photos from Abu Ghraib got deleted, because our relationships to each other are documented, be wary of the fringe. In order to transcend national boundaries, I think, in order to transcend the limits of whatever singularity, I think about wanting to document everything and how I also want to delete everything. I think about wanting to free up space to document new things. I think about wanting to document new things and how I have to delete digital relationships in order to do this. I scroll through correspondence from people I have fucked before I delete them. I scroll through correspondence from ex-friends before I delete them. I scroll through correspondence from ex-friends that I did performances with before I save the photos and delete the text. I scroll through correspondence from the dead and can't bring myself to delete them. I scroll through the names of who is showing at the SF MoMA and think about how the wrong people get deleted, and how art institutions continue to support murderers like Carl Andre and forget people who are actually important like Ana Mendieta. A nation built up like a secret everyone knows, a nation built up on a global web of lives, a nation built up like power washers that clean cum off the sidewalk, a nation built up against a simple villain. I am the villain, but how dare you think me to be simple? This myth is hard on the body. Thank you.
All right, next up, we have, where are the bios? Dan Michelle Norris is a Black trans writer living in New York City. She's the editor-in-chief of Electric Lit. Her chapbook, Oust Collection, was named one of the best books of 2018 by Powell's. She is a 2019 Peter Taylor Fellow at the Kenyon Review Fiction Workshop, and her writing has been supported by MacDowell, Tin House, a lot of places. She is the former fiction editor for both Apogee Journal and The Rumpus, and is co-host of the critically acclaimed podcast Food for Thought. She resides in Harlem, where she's hard at work on her debut novel. And always figure skater. Can't forget it. All right, welcome to the stage.
Hi. Okay, so I have a quick question. I have two things that I could read. And so I kind of want to get your input. I could read sexy or I could read political. Sexy? Okay. All right. So this is taken from the opening of my novel. Um, yeah, yeah. Book one. Davis is perfectly safe. He lays flat on his back, legs spread, ankles in the air. He sweats from the heat of Everett on top of him. He revels in the power of Everett's body, the monstrous strength contained by the taut musculature of his arms, his back, the hardness of his chest, and its tuft of dark hair that fans out from a thin line when it reaches his navel. Davis thinks this hidden softness might just be his favorite thing about Everett's body. He aches when Everett pushes deeper, the sound of his pain emerging in a single, whimpering yes. He places one hand on Everett's chest, the other gently on his neck, and pulls him down, close, staring into his eyes, then parting his lips for Everett's tongue. When Everett is inside of him, Davis feels his body become another thing, a being both powerful and delicate, animal and ethereal. He savors Everett's uncomplicated manliness, the depth of his voice, his boorishness during sex, his penchant for bourbon and beer. In some ways, he envies Everett this existence, moving through the world with the easy confidence of a man who is always in charge, always sure of himself. He is passionate and protective, and Davis knows that with Everett by his side, he gets to live a particular kind of freedom. He can be silly or naive. He can wear dresses and high heels and paint his nails, knowing all the while that Everett will protect him, stand by him, desire him. He adores Everett. Everett bends his arms and lowers his chest until their torsos meet. They sweat together as one. He buries his lips in Davis's neck, breathing in the perfume Davis carefully dabbed himself with earlier that evening. He nibbles to make Davis moan, thrusting deeper, rougher, his body slapping hard against Davis. And Davis shudders, cries out, calls his name, his shaky voice turning up on the final syllable, as though the name is a discovery, both question and answer, found at once. He arches his back, opening himself more fully. Everett owns him, and Davis feels his flesh come live, the tips of his fingers burning like trees turned to ash. Everett is anywhere, everywhere, his presence felt with the matter-of-factness of the air, the trees, the water. He fills Davis. He fills the room. It is as though his power has been cloned 10 times over. As Everett thrusts, each movement more intense, more powerful than the last, he drives Davis to bite his lip, to clench the bed sheets. His moans become cries, then shrieks, his body convulses, and as he reaches climax, his fingernails digging into Everett's back, he considers this. He could not escape this man if he needed to. He is not strong enough to fight Everett off, likely not quick enough to move from underneath him. He loves the vulnerability of this, the false danger in his union with Everett. It's an illusion. He knows that Everett would never harm him, but it matters to him that he likes to feel vulnerable to Everett in this way. He wants to stay right where he is, would remain right there, under Everett, held by Everett, forever if he could. If he were a planet, he would revolve around Everett as though he were the sun. They come together, Everett groaning, panting, the hair on his body slick with sweat and plastered to his skin as he slowly lowers himself down to the bed, next to Davis, where he rests. Stay inside me, Davis says after a moment, his voice a whisper, his words a plea. He closes his eyes and turns to his side. Everett continues kissing his neck and shoulder. He loves the way Davis fits so easily in his arms, his body slight, almost in the way of a teenager's. He runs a hand up and down Davis's body. He wraps himself around him. Around my boy, he sometimes thinks. Or my girl, as he also sometimes thinks. Because Davis has confided that he feels he exists somewhere in the middle, in a realm where there is no blue without pink, and the cosmos is painted in secondary colors. And for Everett, the important thing is not the boy or the girl. It's the my. You are tossing and turning in your sleep, Everett says. He raises his head, looking down at Davis. He knows not to push too hard, not to ask too explicitly when Davis makes that face that lets him know something is wrong. Davis lets him in when Davis is ready. I was, Davis sighs, his breath slow and quiet, running his fingertips along Everett's arm. I'm sorry. Everett kisses him again, his lips lingering on Davis's skin. What did you dream? Davis brings Everett's hand to his mouth. working his tongue around the middle finger. After a moment, he says, "No idea." He gazes through the open curtain. Together they look out upon Montauk as snowflakes, effervescent in their walls, glittering pink and white, slowly make their way to the ground. The flakes will not last. Some may not even make it to the ground. It's not cold enough for the flurries to build. But to Davis, there is something attractive in the way the air seems to sparkle. He wraps Everett's hand in both of his, holding it tight to his chest. He thinks about his breathing, tries to match his inhales and exhales to the rising and falling of Everett's chest. Honestly, it's fine. I'm fine. I don't even remember it. 2. Someone will come. Sirens will sound in the distance. Lights will rise from darkness like seraphs, dancing red and blue. Salvation will be brought by men sent from God. These men will come from the east. There is a campus not too far in that direction, a satellite of the state university. The men will move as quickly as possible along the highway, over black ice, close to the barrier that divides east and west. Tread marks will lead them to an indentation in the guardrail, scratched with white paint. The men, always moving, will jump down from their trucks, rubber boots clomping to the pavement with the strength of hooves. One of them will wonder aloud how that white car got all the way down the hill by the quarry. "You can hardly see it," he will say, with his hand at attention. His eyes will strain under the swirling clouds that block the moon, that mute the stars. Another, braver, will lead them over the guardrail, hooves romping easily down the hill like broncos. The men will follow the path cut by the cars that flipped over and over and landed on its caved-in hard top. The Reverend remains strapped in his seat, upside down, his nose only inches from the ground, unable to move. His Toyota crashed into a tree with such force that several elderly branches, heaving from the weight of the snow, sought relief. They broke from the trunk, tumbled through the wintry air, landed on the overturned car. Periodically it creaks, warning him. At some point he knows the car will give under the excess weight, but by then he will be saved. The men will have come and gone, and in between ripped him free. They will come shouting into their walkie-talkies, demanding backup, cursing, not caring if their words offend him. The glare from their flashlights will find him, then blind him. Someone will shout for the men at the top of the hill to aim their headlights at the quarry, give them some light. The Toyota's lights will be extinguished by then. The battery will have died. Once there is light, the Reverend will see how the snow has frozen beneath him, how every window has shattered, how the car he gave his 16-year-old son 8 years ago crumpled around him as though it were nothing more than a toy, a matchbox model, like the ones Davis used to play with. The youngest, newest trooper will kneel as close to the car as possible. He will extend his arm through the broken window. He will shine his flashlight into the Reverend's face, then up and down his body. "Are you hurt?" he will ask. "Davis?" the Reverend will ask the man. "Is it you? Sir, are you hurt? Can you move?" The trooper's voice will ring with easy authority over more sirens sounding in the distance, coming their way, over the slow rumble of traffic that will begin to pile up, though it's after midnight and the roads are barren, over the chatter of the Reverend's teeth, for by this time he will be delirious and so cold that his words will be nearly unintelligible. The Reverend will try to turn his head until he can see the trooper's eyes. He will try, but he will fail. He will know that the trooper's voice is not his son's voice. The trooper's hands, large, pale, and strong, are not his son's hands. He will wonder if these are the hands that will keep him alive, bring him to safety. He will wonder if safety is what Davis sees in that man, the white man, the one he plans to marry. He will wonder if Davis ever saw these things in him. "Sir, don't worry. We're going to get you out of here. Sonny boy," he will say. "Everything is going to be fine. I need my son. I need to see my son," he will say. "Your son isn't here. He's safe. It's only you in this car." The trooper will consider the fact that he too would be thinking of his son if it were him, trapped in that seat, hanging upside down, waiting for help to come. With his free arm, he will slowly reach his hand through the broken window until he can gently press his palm against the driver's shoulder. He will do his best to look the driver in the eye. "Sir, we're going to get you out of here." And then just fast forward 100 pages to book 2, in the opening of book 2. Davis slept, dreams arriving one after the other, rapid fire, an assembly line of his consciousness. In the first, he rose from his bed. He saw the house where he was raised. He saw the hills and trees of Chagrin Valley. He saw the creek that cut through the backyard and the porch swing where his father drank coffee on warm mornings. He heard the crackling of his father's car moving over the gravel driveway every night, arriving home, the office becoming a place far away. He wiggled his toes in the grass of their perfectly cared for lawn. He stood under the willow tree, his favorite childhood hiding space, which sat on the line between theirs and the neighbor's property. He bent down to grab a salamander he spied sitting on a rock in the creek. He cast it into a bucket, and then it was winter. He wore galoshes and packed snow into a mason jar for snow cones, just as he'd done as a boy. He was the Davis, only he wasn't a boy. He was the Davis of today, the fully grown person who would soon marry Carter Everett Caldwell in front of 100 friends and family members. He couldn't see himself, but he saw all of this, felt every sensation in his being as though he were there. He washed his father's feet. He kissed and held his father's hand. He called out his father's name in meditation and in prayer. The house played the role of heaven, his father the role of deity. Davis forgave and was forgiven. In the future, when he speaks of it, he will liken it to the rapture, the divine ending when souls will be snatched from their earthly bodies and instantly transported home. In the second dream, Davis found himself lost by the side of the road. He was surrounded by dirt and trees and roots. He saw soft snow and suffered sharp, biting wind. His body, naked, played victim to its lashing. He tumbled down a hill by a quarry, and thinking he might land in the water, he kicked and punched and tried his best to hold tight to the world around him, roots and rocks and soil and grass. He wanted to avoid dying a frozen death. Breath beaten from his lungs, his body whipped around, limbs and organs sliced and ripped and broken. He realized he might not survive long enough to tumble all the way down the hill, to even make it to the quarry. He remembered how, as a boy, the church warned not to be afraid of death, teaching that it was in fact the path to Jesus, and that Jesus was the path to salvation. It was salvation that brought the saints to glory. And then, with a start, his eyes were heavy, his lids slow to open. As the darkened room gradually came into focus, he saw first the edge of the curtain fluttering in the breeze. He remembered they'd left the window open. The room was freezing and darker than usual. It seemed the nightlight down by the floorboard had burned out. And there, standing at the edge of the bed, Davis's vision still fuzzy, was the shape of a man. A vague outline, but there it was, tall and broad, with arms folded, crossed at his chest. The man wasn't entirely still. At times he seemed to take a step or tilt his head this way or that, though it remained always bowed, as though in prayer, as though waiting, watching, listening. It occurred to Davis then that he couldn't move, that his entire body had been stricken by a bout of paralysis. He could barely feel himself there, only the cold, in which he felt he might drown. Not a finger, not a foot, not an arm felt warmth. But he could breathe, so there was that. And then Everett, and the weight of Everett next to him, shifting, moving, placing his arms and legs on either side of Davis and pulling himself on top of him, like a shield standing guard, watching over. He brought Davis back to life. His lips pressed against Davis's forehead, his stubble brushed Davis's neck. His large hand moved down Davis's body, tracing his ribs, cupping his hip. Blood rushed through Davis's veins, warming him. Everett's voice, deep and steady and present, and oh so very close, came next, right to his ear. It brought light into the room, brought focus to Davis's vision. He turned his head to the side. The curtain was still, the window closed. The light down by the floorboard burned on. The room wasn't cold at all, felt as though it had never been cold in its entire existence. There was nothing, nobody standing at the foot of the bed. Tremors came. His skin rose to Everett's touch, his heart beating with Everett's words. "You're safe. I'm here. It was just a dream." Thank you.
Next up, we have Sally. All right. Sally Wen Mao is the author of Oculus, a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize for Poetry. Her first book, Mad Honey Symposium, was the winner of the 2012 Gensler Award. She has received fellowships from the Coleman Center at New York Public Library and from George Washington University, among others. She was born in Wuhan, China, and raised in the Bay Area, California. Welcome, Sally.
Oh my God, if I stomp, I can hear it. It's very cathartic, right? Thank you so much for being here tonight. I am so thrilled to celebrate Christopher Soto's book. Yeah. Oh my God! Like this has been you do not know how long this book has been anticipated, like, for years. I feel like I met Loma in 2013, so almost a decade ago. I remembered I was in a cab with you, and you were, I want to say you were 22, and you had like such big dreams. I remembered. I think I was jaded and like I think I was 26 and jaded by that time. But listening to Loma just talk about, these dreams of like creating a community, and really, like carving out a space where, in the middle of all this fucking violence, like we are able to connect with one another. I remembered that really truly like moved me, and I just wanted to say that. And I'm just so thrilled to be a part of like the celebration for Diaries of a Terrorist. It's an incredible project, incredible book. So I will read a few poems, like 3 poems. My general feeling these days are, like today, yesterday has been just, like rage, like, that's why stomping and the ground talking to me feels so good, because that makes me think that the ground is angry too, like the ground is echoing in like solidarity. So, so this poem is from my first book, Mad Honey Symposium, and it's called Yellow Fever. There's an epigraph from Gertrude Stein called like Dirty is Yellow. You are the kind of person who would frame a print of Hokusai's Dream of a Fisherman's Wife and stroke the airplane at night, imagining yourself as monster, tentacular lady killer. I'm the eavesdropper sitting in your ear, listening to everything you whisper. I am smaller than milkweed bug, and you can't kill me. With the smugness of a man who has just caught a trout, you say, I love those Asian women. I will fuck you up with the spastic ember of a Puccini opera. I know what you crave. It is larger than me. It is the pretty face on the library book, the fallow field, the woman with a comb in her hair, a grin about her like so many hives. It is squalid peonies, murderous silk. It is febrile butterflies. It's shedding its clothes and it's shredding your pants, and you are the thing in the bidet. Don't try to musk the malodor. Anyone can smell. You love the feel of socket on tongue. Strip the pork rind. Shoot the waif. See that smile? Simulacrum. Tiny waist in jade. You sweat. You slaver. What is this body to you? Body you subsume. Body you misconsume. To have and to hurt. Utter the word orient. I dare you. She may spit or she may nod. Who's to say the hornbeam awakens to blight? Let's see. I guess this book, this book, I feel like my first book was, a lot of it was about how to process anger and vulnerability and also just like sorrow. So and the way that I channeled that was into my like obsession with this animal called a honey badger. And I feel like there's just so many things about honey badgers that I love. I haven't read from this book in so long, but because I talked about 2013 and being in a cab with you, Loma, I'm like, I'm gonna read from this book because it came out. It came out in 2014. So this poem, it's called Honey Badger Palinode. But a broken badger may be a sad thing after all. The sight of her, all slack-jawed, sallow, a sneer but no sledgehammer, mouth but no meat. In those beads for eyes, there is no obsidian, only a gleam, thread stringing thorn and iris together. It lacks control. It lacks beauty. Cells shiver through the walls that contain them until they reach the outside. Air flushes the daylight. The badger shakes. Skin flakes break off snow from a hanging roof. Because she is nocturnal, she prays tonight for mutation. It is no good to want transformation, lighter feet, aerodynamic claws, keener eyes to screen the bodies in the grasses. Panic cannot ford the river. Sacrament, meat, corpus, even the thickest skin is still a membrane. Yeah, so I guess like at the time, honey badgers had this reputation for not giving a fuck and being really fearless and like, stealing prey from lions and like mocking them on a tree or something. And then the lions just like can't do anything about it because, yeah. And then, or eating honey from, or eating the queen bee from like a hive. But really, when they battle like a venomous cobra, they're not really immune to that venom. And that's the part that I was interested in, like they're actually pretty vulnerable creatures. They have really thick skins and they don't care, but I care. Anyway, and I'll read a poem from my latest book, Oculus, kind of in the same vein. Occidentalism. A man celebrates erstwhile conquests, his book locked in a silo, still in print. I scribble, make Sharpie lines, deface its text like it defaces me. Outside, grain fields whisper. Marble lions are silent yet silver-tongued with excellent teeth. In this life, I have worshipped so many lies. Then I workshop them, make them better. An East India Company, an opium trade, a war, a treaty, a concession, an occupation, a man parting the veil covering a woman's face, his nails prying her lips open. I love the fragility of a porcelain bowl, how easy it is to shatter, like the Han Dynasty urn Ai Weiwei dropped in 1995. If only recovering the silenced history is as simple as smashing its container, book, bowl, celadon spoon. Such objects cross borders the way our bodies never could. Instead, we're left with history, its blonde dust. That bowl is unbreakable. All its ghosts still shudder through us like small breaths. The tome of hegemony lives on, circulates in our libraries, in our bloodstreams. One day, a girl like me may come across it on a shelf, pick it up, read about all the ways her body is a thing. And I won't be there to protect her, to cross the text out and say, go ahead, rewrite this. Okay, I'll just read like one more poem. Gosh, all of these poems are so depressing. Yeah, that's the only kind of poem that I like. This is actually not a super depressing poem. Yeah, you know what? I'll read this one. I think I'll end with this one too. So this poem is called Resurrection, and it is kind of about that time in my life, around like circa 2013, 14. What? Aaliyah? You know, the funny thing is that I've been thinking a lot about Aaliyah lately, a lot, because I remembered how Like I bought that album like a couple weeks before she died, and I think it was the first time as like a child I ever cried over the death of a celebrity. I think it was I've been thinking a lot about that because maybe it's past the 10-year mark at this point, but yeah. So this poem is called Resurrection. In the autumn, I moved to New York. I recognize her face all over the subway stations. Pearls around her throat, she poses for her immigration papers. In 1924, the only Americans required to carry identity cards were ethnically Chinese. The first photo IDs read targets on the head of every man, woman, child, movie star. Like pallbearers, they lined up to get their pictures taken. Full face view, direct camera gaze, no smiles, ears showing in silver gelatin. A rogues gallery of Chinese exclusion. The subway poster doesn't name her, though it does mention her ethnicity and the name of the New York Historical Society exhibition, Exclusion, Inclusion. Soon, when I felt alone in the city, her face would peer at me from behind seats, turnstiles, heads, and headphones, and I swear she wore a smile only I could see. Sometimes my face aligned with hers, and we would rush past the bewildered lives before us, hers gone, the year my mother was born, and mine, a belt of ghosts trailing after my scent. In the same above-ground train, in the same city where slain umbrellas travel across the Hudson River, we live and live. I've left my landline so ghosts can't dial me at midnight with the hunger of hunters anymore. I'm so hungry, I gnaw at light. It tunnels from the shadows and exhausting hope. I know this hunger tormented her too. It haunted her through her years in LA, Paris, and New York, the parties she went to, people she met, Paul Robeson, Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, Gertrude Stein. It haunts her expressions still on the 6th train, Grand Central Station, an echo chamber behind her eyes. But dear universe, if I can recognize her face under this tunnel of endless shadows against the luminance of all that is extinct and oncoming, then I am not a stranger here. Thank you.
I was thinking earlier, right before Sally came on, actually, about like the homies. We're a small, intimate group here, but I'm just like, holy shit, I think I've known 50% of this audience for a decade. Like, it is fucking wild. And people who knew me a decade ago, God bless you. Because that was a shit show. I mean, yeah, Sophia, we interned at Poetry Society of America in like 1925. Jameson helped introduce me to like Lambda Literary in like 1930. Like, it's got just a lot of different variations of selves that we've seen each other through. So okay, Lynn is next. Lynn and I met in the 70s. I think I'm a no new friends person. Like, I like just came to New York and met like you and Sally and the folks here, and we're like, all right, this is my crew. And 10 years later, it's just the same thing. It's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. All right, bio. Lynn also has accolades. As the author of the poetry collection Refusnik, Landscape with Sex and Violence, and If I Should Say I Have Hope, all with Yes Yes Books, and the co-editor of Please Excuse This Poem, 100 Poets for the New Generation. Her memoir, I've Had to Think Up a Way to Survive on Trauma, Persistence, and Dolly Parton, is forthcoming from University of Texas Presses. American Music Series in 2022. She's received grants from the Cafe Royal Cultural Society and the Hadassah Brandeis Institute, a former fellow at the New York Public Library's Coleman Center for Scholars and Writers, and previously on the executive board of VITA, Women in the Literary Arts. She currently teaches poetry at Columbia University and the 92I. Welcome, Lynn.
Hi. I'm going to read 4 poems. And I just want to say this is such, I mean, I love you. And I'm so happy about this book. And, you know, I'm a bit older. And I had, you know, I was all sort of like filled up with friends, you know, when I met you. And then I met you. So, and I'm so happy that we know each other. So I'm going to read 4 poems, 2 from each. So I'm going to read 2 right now from my newest book, Refusenik. Speaking of being older, this one is called Getting On. I don't need to be told my body is not what my body was, descending, live wire, the option to light. People keep telling me it's my ass or my face, but it's neither, and it's both. Tell me what to do about sliding into oblivion, about what is material and what will be remembered. Aging is a motherfucker, I say to myself. I fuck myself. I mother. When I'm alone, I document that I was here while I'm still here. This next one is, well, I guess it's sort of like a sex work origin story. If that's a thing. It's called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. You can only hear "you look like a hooker" so many times before you become one. Spandex was really big the year I stopped believing. I babysat for the rabbi's son, Isaac. There was Lux carpet in every room of the condo. Isaac liked Legos, and we made a pasture and a patriarch and lots of wives. In his car, in his garage, the rabbi handed me a self-help book and put my hand on his crotch, ready to go. I didn't care. I made good money. Isaac lived to be 180 according to the Bible. Isaac is the only patriarch who didn't have concubines. Isaac is 30 now. Modern scholarship tells us the patriarchs never existed. Survival has taught me the patriarchs are what we've got. So I'm going to read, thank you. I'm going to read 2 poems from my book prior to Refusenik, which is Landscape with Sex and Violence. It's as fun as it sounds. I think, hold on, I'm trying to figure out which ones to read. So one of the things that I've talked with Loma a lot about over the years is how we write domestic violence. And one of the things I think that also that I think sort of connects with the work Loma does is sort of there's this idea that I think oftentimes when people speak of abolition, they say, well, what about the victims of domestic violence? But that is not. This poem is about how police utterly failed me in every domestic violence situation. So they are not an argument for sticking around. It's called Landscape with Written Statement. And it probably goes without saying, trigger warning for domestic violence. Landscape with Written Statement. You wrap my ribs in gauze and experiment with the word tenderly after your hands left my throat too bruised to speak. While winter sun squints at the ghost flower dying in its shabby terracotta far from home, men tell me to be honest about my role in the incident. Okay, yes, I should have stayed inside while you railed from the sidewalk, but my confused heart got into the car. What happened is, I once spent too much time in the desert, so Paganip seems glamorous, hung stuck in the trees, like when blood dries on skin, and I want to wear it out for an evening, pat my hands over its kinky path down my face, because fuck you. You didn't find me here. I brought you here. This is my angry book. Or maybe all my books are my angry book. So I'm going to finish, if I can find it, with a poem. I should probably know where, this is not even my new book. I should know where the poems are. So this one, I was born the same year that Roe was made law. And yet, when I was 14 in my state, which is California, it was illegal for a 14-year-old to get an abortion without parental consent, which I was not in a safe position to get. So so I ended up having 2 illegal abortions in the late 1980s, and they were sketchy as fuck. And so obviously this is on my mind tonight. And so I'm going to read this poem. The other thing I think that's probably important to know about this poem is that after I had these abortions, the doctor told me that I would never be able to have children, which was a lie. But I didn't know that for a lot of years because I just took his word as gospel. Landscape with clinic and oracle. Maybe you're not the featherweight champ of all the cutthroat combat sports, 15 and pregnant again, but you'd convert your ring corner into a slaughterhouse before you'd inquire after human kindness. In the humdrum flare outside the clinic, you wait for a ride, feel the spill at the tipping point trickle down your inner thigh as you bask in the post-industrial particulate on your skin, ash into a jasmine pot's bituminous anchorage, so tacky it glows in a habitat that spent your body long before it finished growing. Lynn, they lied to you, don't you know? Your womb will be the first thing to heal. What you smell is pleasure, not the rot of the thing amid the waste. You will have babies. You will write poems about flowers that turn on in darkness. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everyone, for reading tonight and for being here. I'm me reading from my book. There's a short bio. Yes, thank you. Too kind. It's almost as if I'm in a room full of friends. All right. So, the book is really new. It's been here for like 19 hours or so, officially in the world. And so it's nice to be with all of you and shooting the shit and figuring out how I'm going to talk about this. So one of the things that I've been like building vocabulary, figuring out how to talk about this book. Within the process of writing it, I've been thinking about what does the poetics of abolition mean and what's the role of like a poet within abolitionist spaces. And if someone's going to ask me about abolition, it's like, I remember when, and maybe in like 2013, when people would ask for elevator pitches about abolition. And I'm like, you can't do a fucking elevator pitch on reconstituting your whole like relationship to the world. I just don't know how to do that. And so when thinking about kind of the questions and interactions as far as how to engage with this book, I was like, what does it mean for a poet to be producing this artifact? And I think one of the things that poets do is we just pose questions. We don't have answers. We don't know the truth. We don't know the reality. We could hardly find our hands. How fun is that, right? And so what does that give us the opportunity to do as abolitionists? It gives us the opportunity for people to say, like, how does this get accomplished legislatively? And we go, fuck, I don't know, I'm a poet. And that is totally our realm, and that's so beautiful because our goal is to imagine the world outside of logicality. We get to be the dreamers. And so that's what I view as one of the hearts of the poetics of abolition. But I think also what we do is we work with language and the particularities of language. So I think about people like Dr. Kelly Lytle Hernandez, who instead of incarceration talks about human caging. And when I hear about arrest, I'm like, is arrest actually what's going on right now, or is it kidnapping? Do we have our families who are walking down the streets and are taken out unsuspectingly from their social and economic lives and kidnapped by the state? So I think as someone also working within language as a poet, that's our role. Today, because I'm with friends, I just want to have fun in language. Some poems really don't work well in terms of oration, and those are the ones I want to read for you. I hope that's okay. I just want to dance. and this is my form of dancing. My little sister is here, and she would look at me on the dance floor and she would say, but with more heart. So, all right, the last thing I want to say about this book, and then I'll read this long sonic poem that will hopefully don't try to find a meaning, just enjoy the process with me. The last thing that I want to say is domestic violence is at the heart of this collection. And Jay and I were talking earlier, and one of the things that I was saying was I really want that to be a heart of the conversations with this book, right? Because the stories of survivors are often used to augment police budgets, as if this binary of criminality versus innocence exists, as if the prisons are not filled with survivors, right? So we all have to understand there's no good people and bad people here. The survivors, the quote, innocent, are the people who are also filling the prisons. And what I mean by tackling violence head on through an abolitionist context and abolitionist lens is understanding that if we're interested, in supporting survivors and ending cyclical and recurring violence against the lives of survivors, it's abolition today. It's abolition now. That's 1.9 million people who are having state violence ended against them. So when you hear abolition tomorrow, just remember that's another name for reform. So as an abolitionist interested in confronting violence, I know that that starts with ending all prisons and ending all police. All right, so here's the poem. Let's not make sense together. And maybe it's a beautiful end to the parentheses from where you started us, Che. So it's called Two Lovers in Perfect Synchronicity, figure 19. In 1991, Felix Gonzalez Torres made an installation in memoriam of his boyfriend, Ross Laycock. The installation was comprised of candies individually wrapped in multicolor cellophane. The pile of candies weighed 175 pounds, or Ross's ideal body weight before he contracted AIDS. Throughout the day, visitors to the gallery ate the pile of candy and therefore diminished the body of Ross, depleting his weight like AIDS did. Then at night, when everyone left the gallery, the curators could choose to replenish the pile of candy, restoring Ross to his original weight and granting him eternal life, or not. The poem's dedicated to our queer mentors that we never had a chance to meet, especially Ross and Felix. We were born the month Ross died in Los Angeles. Our baby back, toasted and tattooed. Our neck, sweat, sweet, wet back, beaner, speaking Spanglish. Our clothes clings on the clothesline, the swing swings on the swing set. We were wearing beach, sand, dollars, sand crab, summer skin so tanned. We were born, and Ross was mourning the lost hymn of him. Pour one out, y otra, pa arriba, pa abajo, centro, free tequila for the kids, spray painting our names at the wash, vegan snacks at the punk show. We wanted to believe masturbation is sex with someone you love, but still we're a part of a whole generation of queer youth being raised without elders. Who's Ross to us? A whole generation lost to AIDS, Our Lady of Constant Descent, a little gory allegory. Hugo, our true love. Hugo de Naranja. When we broke up, he broke down. We were all ribs and on the barbecue. He played the xylophone with his tongue. Inflatable pool in the front yard. Yellow grass, cage macaws, palm trees, tilted pool tables, the dog with knotted hair, chanclas with socks on the beach, seashell buckets, cocinando pupusas con mamá, bebiendo con la champán, the boombox, Pokemon graffiti walls and skater boys, no shirt, bony as greyhounds, Hugo's plaid boxers peeking out of Dickie shorts. He rode on the pegs of our bikes, the ice cream truck over Celia Cruz, piñata, tarot cards, hoop earrings, and aerosol spray. We reapply eyeliner like a chola before mall photos. Eloteros, football, Sunday church, bachata, cumbia, no rain, curanderos, and Theo transcribed at the seance. We pretended to get stigmata. All the girls who lived on the West Coast are having nostalgia. Oh, Los Angeles. Oh, Hollywood Hills. Oh, Placita Olvera. Oh, San Pedro. Oh, Long Beach. Oh, Taqueria and Westminster. Oh, the 405 freeway. Left arm sunburnt. Windows down. We were on the beach chairs, beach coolers, beach bums, but peanut butter jelly sandwiches, which chips on the sand, Pringles or Ruffles, vodka watermelon, suntan lotion, and we laughed with towels over our head. Police said, "Are you drunk? Are you high?" We replied, "No, we're Salvadoran." Police harassed us so much. We stopped biking. We moved to a different city. Police asked us, drivers, lice, sense. Our red rubbed eyes, our brown skin, our brown. We didn't jog the stop sign. We didn't pass the speed limit. Our music wasn't too loud. No queremos hablar contigo, jodón. And it's amongst these conditions we love. We try to. Homeboy is beautiful. Felix and Ross, Hugo and us, on the down low, lowriders and smog, homie, ho, he, is hugging on the stomach of our pelo, con boca cerrada no entran, tumbleweeds and cacti, and every day at the museum. Visitors walked in installation, a pile of candies individually wrapped. The visitors were looking for Ross, looking for UFOs, and our family of aliens in the rose bush. Iron welded gate, weed whackers pushing lawn mowers over flinching finches. Electric tidal capitalism crashed over us. When prisons closed, we hope there are no museums for pain, where tourists can safely visit nobody, while prisoners are in solitary around this country. We made phone calls to our deaf friends, telling them to hurry to the hospital, that Ross holds the angles of angels. Have you heard? The extreme loneliness of the pervert parade. Ross, we're here, baby. Everything will be all right, we wanted to say. But he was gone before we came, with wet dreams of our cousins, twerking in the laundromat, tweaking in the library, feeling nauseous and agnostic. What's good? Where's God? Beneath the vacancy sign. Where's our therapist? Maybe this is how we leave. The hospital, the poem, the cemetery has fine typography. The ones we love, the fonts we need. Maybe we never breathed the cleanest air, visited Scandinavia, looked at auroras and their stretch marks. How Saturn lost her rings. Maybe the chore list was never meant to be completed. With Venus in retrograde, we tried not to drown while swimming backstrokes in rosé and roses with pit bulls named Rosie. Maybe one day we'll wake an oddity in the domestic and say, Ross, we're here. Where are you? Was that it? Was that life? We didn't do enough. We did so much. And I'll read maybe 2 more poems. So I think when reading this book, it's also hard to be like, this is an abolitionist poetry book. I don't even know what that means, even though I keep saying it. But how that reading or rendering might take place in that context, for example, is like someone asked me about that poem in relationship to abolition recently. And I was like, for me, that poem is, maybe I'll start off with this quote from Tourmaline, actually. That is often circulated for good reason, but when we say abolish the police, we also mean the cop in your head and in your heart. And so for me, when thinking about that poem, it's like you're talking about police harassment on the beach when you're hanging out with friends and family. And what are the spaces that get occupied? It's like the police are so omnipresent, especially in Los Angeles, the carceral capital of the world, you know, that we embody the police. We police ourselves and we police the people around us, so that even our places of joy and reprieve, like the beach, become places where you can't get drunk. You can't, you know, pass the bottle without being like, oh, are they gonna see me? Am I gonna get in trouble? And like, what does our joy and what does our connection, what does our culture look like outside of the cop in our head and in our heart? And so that's where, so I know when we read the poems, sometimes you'd be like, bitch, why you keep on talking about abolition? But it's there, I promise. This last poem I want to read, I just decided it's the last poem. It's called Orgies for the Elderly. And I'll read two. I'll read, because this one is next to it, and who cares? It's my book club. I do what I want. Thanks. Okay, I feel better about that. You're going to regret it after this sentence. Both of these poems are also very hard in terms of oration, but that's the mood I'm in. And I only make that sort of clarification because I think certain literary histories, so even within the context of the United States, like the history of like spoken word gets so vastly like undervalued. And I'm like, there's just different principles through which like the lens of craft happens, right? So right now I may be failing according to certain histories of oration. Like I'm not conscious of my hands and my bodily movement and the fluctuations in my voice and the relationship between the cadence of my voice and the content of the poem to a cue. Like that isn't centralized as the metric by which my craft is being judged in this moment, right? And so it's just like ridiculous that we look at certain oral histories and like spoken word poems and we say this isn't poetry. Anyway, so I'll fail in front of you because who cares? Orgies for the elderly. Swayed by the world's ugliest models, and finally, especially in New York where everyone is so special, finally enjoying the mediocrity of ourselves. We sold art for aristocracy, and some days we were so desperate for touch. Breastfeeding mothers made us jealous. We should be more ashamed, we know. We looked our anus in the ugly, and it was looking back at us. How we shifted from desire to desire until there was no more wanting. Ghastly, scared of being stuck, like a blowfish in a plastic ring. Do you know how to scare an octopus? Ask about its future. Memory swam by, a silver shark we didn't want to touch. We took out the trash. We took out ourselves. We got arthritis while jerking him off. Our dentures dropped to his pubes, and we drooled like a little dog. He came with our walker and a mountain of Viagra, then sucked until the slow celestial release. While Zapatistas sang their hymnos in Chiapas, we got life advice from pregnant teens. Only salt for sugar daddies. Thursdays, we knelt like a horse, braiding its hair in the cypress tree. Horses are unicorns that lost the war. Always next up in the poverty line. We watch our culture sell. We watch our culture sell. We watch our culture sell. We watch our culture sell on the stock exchange, becoming recycled TV memories, each cloud dreamt of solid form. To forever love gay Kalash boys, to forever pray beneath the Pope's glitter thong. Thank you. And this is the last poem. So one of the things that happens, I think, also for communities of color, people of color, abolitionists, whatever identity markers we're using these days, is that we simultaneously need to create the vocabulary to not only justify our existence, but to like explain it. So sometimes I remember just feeling myself, or I remember being asked to talk about the craft in my literature, and I'd have certain poems like transactional sex with Satan, and people would be like, why can you just have it sex with Satan? Does it have to be transactional sex with Satan? And I'd be like, oh, actually, I like the alliteration of the S sound. So if I take out transactional and it's just sex with Satan, I'm reducing the musicality. And then you have the follow-up question, what's musicality? And so I'd be like, all right, well, this poem is put in relationship to a punk history for me, growing up off punk. So what could possibly be a punk literary aesthetic, right? So for me, it's like sacrilege, it's an affinity for the grotesque, it's hypersexuality, it's outlandishness that almost dismisses the rhetoric and the ethos that it puts forth. So you'll hear like that as the backbone of how I came to understood literary craft. And then there's a billion other craft notes, but who cares about that? Craft is racist. Barebacking the bar back. This came out with Copper Canyon. I don't get it either. We're his retired slut. We're his retired slut on food stamps forever, sniffing horse tranquilizer, seeing digital dreams. This sweet and cherry boy pussy is a great machine. Twice, faggots chased down the nude avenue, stalked and photographed, buying burner phones, the cellophane sound of cyber threats, entropy, and the new brutal black midnight public crying. We spoke literally. We lost obsidian and a job on the dark web. We were harassed, scissoring our femme queen, and he violent a bit nervously. The sky is a constellation of arrows. Something gold feathered, forgive us for speaking, we spoke. Smelling like dog piss and disappointment. Everyone hurt. Spat diamonds on the sand. Hell is temperate climate compared to this life without you. And that poem was about being chased by white supremacists who cyber hacked us after doing activist work in the city with people I loved. So abolition is always the backbone. It's always the backbone. And it's always the horizon. Thanks for making no sense with me, for giving me, actually, hold on, let me actually say that because, yeah. Okay, yeah, because there's a lot of people who put in a lot of years and who have forgiven me for a lot of things and have grown with me a lot. Okay, that's all. Thank you. Can we turn the music up? Also, we have books for sale, and I'm gonna get drunk after. All right, bye.